My name is Valerie. I am 21 years old and a university student. I live with my older sister, Elizabeth. When I was just 11, our parents died in a terrible car crash. Elizabeth became everything to me. My sister, my mother, my whole family. She gave up so much of her own life to raise me, to protect me, to make sure I never felt truly alone. Elizabeth is brilliant and kind. She works as a history professor at my university, and her students adore her. She is married to Richard Fox, an English professor at the same school. Everyone says what a perfect couple they make. Elizabeth always smiles when she talks about him. "I married my best friend," she would say, her eyes full of warmth. But something in me never felt quite settled around Richard. Sometimes the way he looked at me made my skin crawl. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself to stop overthinking. I pushed the feeling deep down and tried to forget it. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Richard. My eyes froze as I read it. "You looked so beautiful today. I can't stop thinking about you." My hands trembled. I told myself it was a mistake. I did not reply, but the messages kept coming. More words, more pressure. He asked me to meet him for coffee. He told me I felt the same way. He told me I knew it. I felt sick and frightened. I ignored every message, but it only got worse. The next day after my class, Richard was standing outside the building waiting for me. He smiled and said, "Every time I see you, I fall more for you." I turned and walked away as fast as I could. I locked myself in a washroom stall and cried until my legs felt weak. He continued following me around campus. He called me. He sent message after message. He even said, "I don't care if you are Elizabeth's sister. You have to love me." Those words made me feel hollow inside. I stopped sleeping properly. I stopped eating. I felt trapped in a nightmare with no exit. I knew I had to tell Elizabeth. She deserved the truth. But the evening I finally found the courage to speak, she came home glowing with happiness. She placed a small shopping bag on the table and said, "Richard and I are trying for a baby through IVF. I hope to become a mother soon." I felt my heart crack quietly inside my chest. I could not say a word. How could I take that joy from her? So I stayed silent again. That night, alone in my room, I cried until there was nothing left. Then Richard came to my door. He knocked and I opened it, not knowing who it was. He stood there and said he loved me, that he wanted me. I shouted at him to leave, or I would call the police. The confidence drained from his face instantly. He left. I locked the door and sat against it on the cold floor, shaking. I knew then that I could not carry this secret any longer. Elizabeth had to know, no matter how much it would hurt her. The next evening, when she came home carrying a tiny pair of baby shoes she had bought, I sat her down and told her everything. My hands would not stop shaking. I told her about the messages, the following, the night he came to my room. For a moment, Elizabeth went completely still. Then her face changed. She stood up and shouted at me. She called me a liar. She said I was jealous and trying to destroy her marriage. Before I could finish my sentence, she slapped me across the face. The sting was nothing compared to what happened in my chest. She pointed to the door and told me to get out. She said I was not her sister. I went to my room and wept until my phone rang. It was my friend Samra calling to scream at me. Richard had already told everyone his version of the story. He had twisted everything, painted me as the one who had pursued him. Even Samra hung up without listening. I was completely alone. No one believed me. Not my sister. Not my friend. No one. But I had proof. I had every message Richard had ever sent me. The next morning, I walked to the university office and placed my phone on the desk. I showed them everything. One of the staff members looked up at me and said, "This is serious. We will take action." For the first time in weeks, I felt something that almost resembled hope. Days passed slowly. Then the university called me in. When I arrived at the office, Elizabeth was already there. She looked pale and exhausted. A staff member sat across from us and said, "Valerie, we reviewed everything. The messages, the records. We believe you." Tears burned my eyes. I looked at my sister. The staff turned Elizabeth's attention to the messages on the screen. I watched her read them. I watched the color leave her face. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She whispered, "He told me you were lying. He told me you wanted him." She covered her mouth with her hand. Oh God, I was wrong. I hurt my own sister. She stood up and crossed the room and pulled me into her arms. She kept saying she was sorry, over and over, her voice breaking each time. I held her tightly and told her I loved her. I told her I had never hated her, not even for a moment. Not when she slapped me, not when she threw me out, not when she chose to believe him over me. She was the person who had raised me. She was the closest thing to a mother I had ever known. My love for her had never wavered. That night, Elizabeth found an old phone of Richard's. On it were more messages, more lies, more names. The full truth of who he was spread out before her in cold, bright light. She came to my room, sat beside me on the bed, and said quietly, "You were right, Valerie. I am so ashamed of what I did to you." Elizabeth filed for divorce and took Richard to court. The day she faced him in that room, she looked at him without flinching and said, "You broke my trust. You hurt my sister. You destroyed the family I worked my whole life to protect. I want nothing more to do with you." Richard said nothing. He sat with his eyes fixed on the floor, silent and ashamed. Slowly, life found its color again. Elizabeth and I healed together. We talked late into the night. We laughed again. We cried together over things we could not change, and then we chose to move forward anyway. The truth had cost us both something we could never fully get back. But it had also given us something stronger, a bond that had been tested by the worst kind of betrayal and had survived. Sometimes the person you trust the most is capable of hurting you the deepest. And sometimes the people who love you will fail you before they find their way back. But if you hold on to what is true, if you refuse to be silenced, the truth will find its way into the light. It always does. Even when it costs everything, the truth is always worth it.